The Arkansas Historic Preservation Program presents Arkansas's Haunted Historic Hotels. Arkansas has drawn tourists since before it was a state, especially to the natural springs in the Ozark and Ouachita Mountains. Hot Springs has long been considered a place for healing. The water has no medicinal uses, but it does come out of the ground safe to drink at 143 degrees Fahrenheit. The waters at Eureka Springs were first popularized by a Civil War-era doctor who claimed they cured eye disease. The city has been a mecca for good health ever since. Since the 1870s, hotels have played a large role in the business and civic life of both Arkansas towns. Hotels are often the location of grand celebrations and gatherings. They are also sometimes temporary home to colorful characters. Hotels like the Crescent in Eureka Springs and the Arlington in Hot Springs inspire many stories. Some of these folktales involve ghostly visitors. Hot Springs was first studied by the explorers Hunter and Dunbar, who spent 4 weeks there in 1804. In 1807, Louisiana planter Jean-Pierre Prudhomme was the first European to build a house in the area. By 1820, the first hotel opened. It was really just a log cabin with a bathtub. Even when Hot Springs was nothing but 3 log cabins and a store, visitors came and went. Some stayed to take advantage of the tourist trade. In 1832, the United States government made Hot Springs the first federal reservation, the equivalent to a national park. This encouraged more visitors and more business. After the Civil War, illegal gambling became part of everyday life. The first Arlington Hotel was built in 1875, during a time of rebirth for the city. The railroad first came to Hot Springs the same year, making travel easier. In 1876, a fire destroyed many of the older bathhouses. A series of new Victorian-style bathhouses were built along Bathhouse Row. The first Arlington Hotel was owned by a group of men that included Samuel Fordyce. He gave his name to both the Arkansas City and to the Fordyce Bathhouse. It was the largest hotel in the state and could accommodate 200 guests. The second Arlington Hotel was built in 1893 to compete with newer hotels like the Majestic, the Park, and the Eastman. This version of the Arlington stood until April 5, 1923, when fire broke out. Many guests ignored the smoke until it was almost too late. Several had to be rescued from rooms. One fireman, George Ford, was killed. The third Arlington Hotel was built across the street from its original location. It opened November 28, 1924. The building was designed by George R. Mann, the same architect who designed the Arkansas State Capitol. The third version of the Arlington was built during Prohibition. The 18th Amendment made the production and use of alcohol illegal in the United States. In the 1920s, illegal casinos selling illegal liquor began to operate. Between the 1920s and the 1940s, Hot Springs was a second home for several notorious organized crime figures. Owen Madden, Al Capone, Lucky Luciano, Bugsy Siegel, and Meyer Lansky. They were drawn by resort life, gambling, and bootlegging. Al Capone was the Arlington's most famous guest. He made millions controlling the liquor trade in Chicago and used the Arlington as a vacation home. He stayed in Suite 443 because it overlooked the Southern Club, a famous night spot. He often rented out the entire 4th floor to accommodate his friends and staff. Al Capone stopped coming to Hot Springs in the late 1920s when he fell in love with Miami. He died there in 1947 after years in prison. He may have given up on the Arlington, but some people claim Capone's presence is still there and may haunt his favorite fourth floor. The elevator frequently goes to the fourth floor all on its own. Some have seen a bellman, Henry Tweedle, appear in the hallway looking confused. Henry Tweedle has been dead for years. There are no specific stories about the Arlington in terms of murders, suicides, or strange goings-on. This may be because there are just too many colorful stories to focus on one. Instead, the most often repeated ghost stories have to do with poltergeist activity. The word poltergeist is German for noisy ghost. It means a ghost or other supernatural being supposedly responsible for physical disturbances like loud noises or thrown objects. Bartenders often tell guests that bottles of wine sometimes slide right off the bar, as if pushed. Other staff members have reported objects knocked off shelves by invisible hands, chairs moving on their own, and other strange occurrences. Eureka Springs is a town thanks mostly to the efforts of one man, Dr. Alva Jackson. Before the Civil War, Dr. Jackson brought his son to the springs. He claimed the water cured his son's eye ailment. After the Civil War, Dr. Jackson began marketing the water as Dr. Jackson's Eye Water, which made Eureka Springs famous and began to attract tourists. In 1878, Judge Levi Bess Saunders was living in Berryville. He had a sore on his leg that would not heal. Someone suggested that he visit Dr. Jackson's spring. Judge Saunders went to visit the basin spring, where he built a temporary shelter. Judge Saunders claimed that the water healed his sore. He began to spread the word among his friends and family. This started a rush of people traveling to Eureka Springs that quickly turned into a flood. By 1880, Eureka Springs had about 4,000 permanent residents and as many as 15,000 permanent and temporary residents at any one time. Powell Clayton was a Union soldier who finished the Civil War at the rank of Brigadier General. He and his two brothers moved to Arkansas after the war. Powell was Arkansas governor from 1868 to 1871. After his term in politics, he moved to Eureka Springs with his family and immediately saw the need for a railroad. In its early days, the nearest railroad was a 5-hour carriage ride from Eureka. Powell Clayton started the Eureka Springs Improvement Company, which helped bring the railroad to town. In 1884, the Eureka Springs Improvement Company envisioned one of the finest resorts in the nation on top of a hill in Eureka Springs. The idea was to attract wealthy tourists and to give them a place of elegance to stay for a season. The Eureka Springs Improvement Company built the Crescent Hotel out of the finest limestone, using labor by Irish stone masons. The hotel cost about $300,000 to build. Today, that would be around $42 million. The hotel opened 2 years later in 1886. It boasted several amenities: elevators, a gas and sewer system, an incline railway to Spring Street, water from Crescent Spring, a stable, private bathrooms, and Edison lamps. While the hotel was under construction, an Irish stone mason named Michael fell from the roof and landed in what is now room 218. Michael has been reported to haunt this room ever since. He likes to touch people, especially young women. He likes to push people out of bed, mostly men. If a guest leaves Michael some whiskey, he will leave them alone. He has been reported to close the room door when asked.
Okay, Michael, shut the door. Please, Michael, shut the door.
One day, during the time that the hotel was a functioning resort, one of the employees brought their small 3-year-old daughter to work. The little girl fell through the banister on the staircase and landed on the basement landing. She did not survive. The spot where she landed is now one of the most active paranormal spots in the building. According to the Crescent tour guides, electromagnetic readers always go off here. By 1908, attitudes changed about the healing power of water at Eureka Springs. The Crescent began to lose money. The Eureka Springs Improvement Company leased the building to the Crescent College for Women. The Crescent College educated wealthy young women in the arts and sciences. It was known for its academics. The school produced several accomplished women. One alumnus, Rady Britton, was a symphonic composer. Mary Bendelari was a famous shoe designer and challenger to an American law that made it illegal for women to patent inventions. The Crescent College and Conservatory for Young Women kept a very tight rein on its students. They were never allowed to be alone with young men. One night, the girls were caught trying to haul a young man up to the 3rd floor via a rope and a laundry basket. Not long after, according to folklore, a young woman jumped off the 4th floor balcony. The rumor was that she was pregnant and jumped, or was pushed, to her death. Folktales claim that at 10:30 p.m., she appears as a mist on the side of the building, coming down just where the girl jumped. One day in the 1990s, a police officer was watching the hotel from across the valley. He clearly saw a woman in a white dress fall from the 4th floor. He called the hotel to put them on alert and rushed to the site. Nothing was found. During the Crescent College years, another impressive woman lived in the building. In 1912, Mary Breckenridge married Richard Thompson, who was head of the college. They had a son, Clifford Breckenridge Thompson, in 1914. Mary and Richard called him Brecky. In January 1918, Clifford died of appendicitis. After Brecky's death, Mary divorced Mr. Thompson and went to work as a nurse in Europe during World War I. After the war, she was trained as a midwife in London and studied public health at Columbia. She started the Kentucky Frontier Nursing Service, which was credited with saving thousands of lives. According to folklore, poor Brecky never left the Crescent. Guests see him in the 3rd floor hallway, walking up and down the hall and bouncing a ball. He appears to be dressed in a velvet suit. He sometimes bounces his ball on the doors of unsuspecting guests. He often says, "It's not fair! It's not fair!" According to Crescent tour guides, Brecky's father had just canceled Christmas celebrations because of World War I. Brecky was very upset. Maybe he still is. After Crescent College closed down for good in the 1930s, it took on a new life as a hospital. In 1937, it was purchased by Norman Baker. Baker was born in November 1882. He was the son of an inventor and factory owner. Baker quit school at 16 to become a machinist, but instead started a mind-reading act and performed at vaudeville theaters. In 1914, Norman Baker invented his version of a calliope, which was a musical instrument run by steam. Baker's version runs on compressed air. The calliophone made Baker rich. In 1925, Baker started the KTNT radio station. It became very popular among Midwest farmers. Baker used KTNT to criticize big business, the American Medical Association, and aluminum cookware. Baker also opened a gas station, sold a bean product, and started a publishing business. In 1929, Baker's magazine began promoting the cancer cure. A few months later, he opened a cancer hospital in Muscatine, Iowa. He had no medical training. Still, he made over $75,000 a month by 1931, just with the hospital business. That would be over $1 million today. The Federal Radio Commission shut down KTNT in 1931. Baker moved the station to Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, and boosted its power to 100,000 watts. He ran for governor and senator in Iowa, but by 1936, he was run out of the state. Baker moved his hospital to Eureka Springs and took over the Crescent Hotel. He painted the lobby and other parts of the hotel purple and lavender, his favorite colors. The chimneys on top of the building are still painted purple. Baker didn't believe in pain medication, so when patients became particularly ill, he moved them to the third floor and locked them behind a steel door to muffle their screams. Baker kept a morgue in the basement. When patients died, staff moved bodies to the morgue in the middle of the night. On the floor where Baker put his dying patients, many guests report seeing a ghostly nurse pushing a body on a gurney down the hallway. The final spooky folktale about the Crescent comes from its time as a hospital. Theodora was a manager at the Baker Hospital and lived in room 419. While she was working at the hospital, she also got sick with cancer. She died while living at the Crescent. Many people claim to have encountered Theodora's ghost fumbling for keys outside room 419. She always speaks and then disappears. Others have reported Theodora likes to tidy up her room. Guests report personal items moved and repacked. Find out for yourself if the folk tales about these Arkansas hotels ring true by visiting the Arlington Hotel in Hot Springs and the Crescent Hotel in Eureka Springs. The Arkansas Historic Preservation Program oversees the National Register for Historic Places for the state. The AHPP works to identify, evaluate, and preserve important historic places in Arkansas. It is an agency of the Department of Arkansas Heritage.